And we're going to start with Rob from EOS Detroit.
All right, I'll just get going. So you want to be a block producer. Well, I'm here to tell you what that takes and what that means. So without further ado, this is me. This is my baseball card. I'm the CEO of EOS Detroit. I've been in the space for about 4 years as a hobbyist and went full-time last year. So I've been all in on crypto for about 15 months. Eat, sleep, live, breathe, all of it. So this is the index, so I'm just going to skip that. So what's the problem? Why do we need this stuff? In my opinion, the problem is the internet's broken, fundamentally. So what we're doing with EOS is actually creating a new secure internet protocol. And there's a lot of broken things about the internet. Identity's fragmented. You need a different password for all these different services. You have to manage all that complexity and all those passwords. The service providers have control over our identity and our data, and they productize our data, and they don't give us any money for that. It's a giant black box, so we don't have any insight into how some of these service providers work on the inside, and the insiders have whistleblown and said this stuff's pretty insidious on multiple occasions. So we do want to get away from FANG, and you know, they've got their tentacles in everything. Like, even governments are starting to sweat about how much influence and power these startups have. Or not, I mean, mega companies now. So yeah, their tentacles are everywhere, and the internet's broken. So we can use new technology stacks to attempt to solve that. Enter EOS. So EOS is a secure, decentralized internet protocol. It allows you to build decentralized applications that are easy for developers to build and maintain, fast, performant, able to go web scale, abstract away the complexity that we experience using crypto-based applications today, like key management, long hashes, fees. So there's all kinds of benefits to this software, and I'll give you a quick intro. So EOS uses delegated proof of stake. I'm going to gloss over this pretty quick, but essentially this consensus algorithm's optimized to strike the balance between security of the network and performance. So it's decentralized enough. Delegated proof of stake is also optimized to minimize the block interval. So we have half-second blocks, and these are constantly being produced in at a known interval in round robin of the active block producers, which I'll explain later. So this is the scheme, and it's pretty complicated, but essentially there's this pipelining that occurs with each block, and every half second, the finality of all the previous blocks increases by 1. So it's pipelined, and this allows us to essentially create the performance that we experience with EOS. So after 2 seconds, you've got a finalized confirmation. And this is kind of showing the pipeline, courtesy of Dan Larimer. My slide's cut off, so you can't see the attribution. And yeah, so it's designed to be really fast, but still allow us to create decentralized applications. So some of the mechanics of EOS, it's heavily based around voting. So the EOS.io networks are voting secured. Token holders need to vote. They get 30 choices for block producers. That's called approval voting. So they get 100% of their stake is applied to whatever their picks are, 1 to 30. The block producers are ranked by these stake-weighted votes. And then the more turnout, as Luke was kind of mentioning earlier on the panel, the higher the voter turnout, the more secure the network, because single entities or small cabals of individuals have less influence the more stake that's voting. So that's really the challenge we're faced with in EOS today. As a new network, you know, a lot of people with a lot of money on the line don't actually want to risk even uncovering their keys yet, because they may have 100 million or something underneath there, and so they're just kind of waiting for the dust to settle. So we've got a voter turnout of 25%, as opposed to Steam network, which is at 75%, which is really awesome. So I bet within a year or two we'll see EOS climbing to those voter turnouts. And your vote can be delegated to proxies. We've actually got a proxy in the room, Freedom Proxy. He's over there somewhere. Yeah, and Empower Women, Anna. And and Detroit Proxy. We run a proxy too. So, and Luke Stokes. So, the idea behind proxies is a lot of people don't have time to vote responsibly, so they can pick someone to vote responsibly on their behalf. So you can proxy your vote. Resources in EOS. So EOS works a little different from the traditional UTXO architectures we're used to in proof of work systems. So your tokens actually represent a claim on the network's resources. CPU and net are the main resources. So CPU is required to run smart contracts, and net is required to broadcast transactions. And by staking your tokens, you get access to these resources, and that's how EOS doesn't have fees. So it's like you basically have a lifetime claim as opposed to having to pay a microtransaction every single time. RAM is treated a little different. So RAM is on-chain storage, and you can buy or sell that through the system protocol. And dApps need that as well to do on-chain storage, and accounts need a little RAM to be created and things like that. So there is some friction to onboarding because we have to have the resources staked into a new account. So, you know, when we're giving out new accounts, someone has to pay some money, or you have to pay some money on their behalf, or you can also delegate your resources to other accounts. So I can own, 10 EOS, but I can give it to Brandon's account for him to use, so I can lease it out to him. And that allows us to be a little bit more flexible with the system too. So they can be rented. So devs might want to prototype, and they may not want to be exposed to token volatility. So renting through leasing markets, traffic spikes from dApps. Like if a dApp gets a surge of traffic, they can quickly rent enough tokens to not limit their app. And passive income for lenders. So if you're just an EOS investor, you can passively make income leasing out your resources. So this is the courtesy of Thomas Cox, who I think is over there too. This is the token state transition diagram. It essentially shows everything you can do with EOS. So when you have it staked into CPU or net, that's how you get voting power. If your EOS is liquid in your account, it doesn't count for voting. You have to lock it up. But the lockup time is only 3 days, so it's not that bad, as opposed to Steam, which is 13 weeks. And yeah, so just food for thought. So what's a block producer? They're custodians of EOS.io networks that are elected, except for on Warbly. And we'll see other consortium chains, I'm sure, in the future that just pick block producers. So there's 3 classes of block producers. We've got active block producers, which we've got one in our presence here, I think. You guys active right now? Okay, awesome. EOS DAX server is active. So they are actually signing blocks. So with every 2 minutes or so, you sign 12 blocks. And collecting block rewards as well as vote rewards. So in EOS, in order to incentivize standbys to keep their nodes running, there's this threshold of votes you have to hit. Once you hit that threshold, your node is mining or producing value. You're getting paid vote rewards. So basically, all the nodes from position 80 to 1 are earning vote rewards, but only the nodes from position 21 to 1 are earning block rewards. So the actives are making more. And the vote rewards are stake proportional. So 1 makes more than 2, makes more than 3, makes more than 4. So if you're number 1, you're making the most on the network. And then if you're a backup, you're under the threshold and you're not making any. So common traits of block producers: early adopters, technical specialists, community builders, entrepreneurs, people who see the opportunity, freedom fighters, people who believe in this technology for movement building, people who want to make money, people who love teaching, people who don't mind being on call because when your node goes down, you have to fix it. People with security expertise, blockchain enthusiasts, and existing companies. We've actually seen a bunch of exchanges and mining pools join, as well as some VCs. So there's a bunch of people getting in the block producer game. So what are the responsibilities of BPs? operating. So that's the core responsibility of a block producer. You have to run your nodes, and there's different types of nodes you have to configure and run. So the main one is the block producing node, which actually is configured to sign blocks if you're in the top 21. That's the one you need to keep the most secure. So that shouldn't be publicly accessible, and it should be not known where it is, even if you can help it. API and full nodes, those are for dApps, essentially. That's actually got all the state of the chain indexed. I believe just the other day, the amount of RAM required to have a full node on EOS, just a little over 4 months into the thing, is 420 gigs of RAM. So this network is bloating, but it's also got a ton of activity and a lot going on, so it's really interesting to watch. And there's also seed nodes. These are used to actually relay the blocks from node to node. So the seed node is what you connect to when you want to sync your node, and it just relays blocks. So you can download blocks from seed nodes, and all of the block producers should be providing all of these. It's basically bare minimum at this point. And even there's block producers that are providing whole clusters of API nodes and stuff to make it scale. So testing new EOS functionality. So we see there's block producers that are maintainers of the EOS mainnet repo. They fork in the code from Block 1, which is the core development company, and test it, run it through some automated testing, make sure it's good, and then tag it, and then all the other block producers can update. Updating your EOS nodes, so making sure you're patching security vulnerabilities, ensuring your infrastructure is hardened, ensuring that you're not able to be DDoS'd, and ensuring that you have proper key management and that hackers can't pwn your infrastructure and take you down. Meeting performance and scaling needs, so continually adding RAM, storage, upgrading CPU when necessary, configuring, optimizing, all of this stuff needs to be done. Automated failover and monitoring. So these are bare minimum too. If your block producer goes down, it should automatically kick off some other block producer somewhere else. That's your block producer. So you should have backup nodes. And then ready to respond to incidents. So when things go down, if there's a huge incident on the network halts, there's a security flaw or something, the block producers need to be ready to respond quickly. Execute. So they also execute proposals to update the system contracts. These are only the actives that have this ability. 15 out of 21 actives, or 2/3 plus 1, which is the DPoS consensus algorithm. They all sign with multi-signature, or it's essentially a multi-signature operation where they all provide a signature, and once we hit 15, then we can actually update the system. And so they also execute arbitration orders. So everyone, right now, that system's kind of janky. We get a order from ECAF, the EOS Core Arbitration Forum, and then we have to go in and configure our nodes and add a blacklist entry. And if one block producer doesn't have the blacklist entry, it doesn't matter. Things can get through. One active, I should say. So that's got work to do, but we're working on it. Executing the will of token holders via referenda. We haven't had to do this yet because we haven't had a referendum contract, but that's coming soon. There's been a lot of work on that. So this would be like updating the constitution and the repo and things like that. And including transactions into and signing blocks. That's something that actives do. So the executive power. Block producers are the executive, token holders are the legislative, and the arbitration forums are the judicial branch of the EOS governance system. Building. So we see the most popular block producers are just building stuff, quite simply. Block explorers, wallets, tools, data viz, figuring out insights, figuring out monitoring, all kinds of different tools. ID management, so Scatter. I mean, Nathan James, who built Scatter, isn't actually a block producer, but it's worth a shout out because it's an awesome app. We also see block producers building games, DAX with their own tokens, leasing markets, DEXs, all kinds of different apps. Building system enhancements. So block producers, I think EOS Authority and EOS Argentina, created a process for unregistered token holders from before EOS launched to actually prove that they hold the Ethereum keys that had their EOS in it and claim their EOS. So that there was 19,000 addresses that couldn't claim. Block producers fixed that. They're building the referendum system. I know Steve's a part of that. And also some node plugins, so you can put custom plugins on your node to do things, and we've seen some of those come out from block producers. So the heartbeat actually reads the system information off the machine. It can be spoofed, but you know, it's basically like moving towards, you know, here's all the RAM I'm providing, and I'm proving it to you through this plugin. And the Watcher plugin, that's really useful for dApp development. So those came from block producers. They also evangelize. So hosting meetups, conferences, talking at conferences, teaching people, hosting workshops, hosting digital conferences, digital workshops, discussion groups, work study groups, educating people on Telegram and Slack, video content that's educational in nature, targeted messaging. So, you know, knowing who you want to talk to. Like if I'm talking to devs, I'm going to have a different language than if I'm talking to users who just want to know why. So we see a lot of block producers evangelizing and going out and promoting this stuff. And then campaigning. So this is important because you won't succeed as a block producer if you don't market the value you're creating back to the token holders, and this is tricky. So you don't, because the token holders are just this amorphous global blob of who knows who. So you don't even know who you're marketing to. You're just kind of throwing stuff out there and hoping that you can hook the whales, I guess, and hoping you can impress them. Brand building. So, you know, we're seeing block producers really focusing on their brand and revamping that because that brand mark is synonymous with them. Business development and partnerships. So block producers partnering with dApps, doing advising for Ethereum startups that want to move to EOS or just new EOS startups, or, you know, going out and partnering with just developer workshops and all kinds of stuff to forward education, forward just government connections like we're seeing in Colorado. There's a lot of that going on. And transparency levers are really important. We kind of mentioned this earlier in the panel. So the transparency levers are like truth bonds and just being an open book with how you spend your block rewards and trying to do a lot of things to just show that you're genuine and prove that you're genuine, rather. And you know, another thing, from my perspective, this is all about movement building. Like, we're building an alternative economy. So we're focused a lot on building grassroots momentum in Detroit on the ground, educating people, building up a base of people that want to use this type of stuff. So how do you become a block producer? First, you got to connect a node. So, you know, this part of the talk's a little technical. I'll go through it pretty quick. But essentially, you connect your nodes. So you get the software, you run it, you configure it. You have to add peers, so that's the important part. That's those seed nodes I mentioned earlier. So you connect to a bunch. You can add any number of seed nodes. So maybe grabs 10 seed nodes from a various number of block explorers, and put those in your config file. And then there's different plugins in EOS, so you can enable different plugins. Like if it's a producer node, it has to be the producer plugin, and you'll need the chain plugin. You'll need a number of plugins. So I'm not going to go into detail there, but that's how you configure this is an API node versus this is a producing node. And there's a good reference at developers.eos.io, so I'm not going to go too deep there. Then you just sync your blocks, and you're connected. So you just run it after you got the peers in there, and it'll download all the blocks. It takes a long time. So I recommend actually going to this site down here, EOS Node Tools. You can just download all the blocks and plug them in, and then you don't have to wait like 2 days. And then you got to register an account. So EOS accounts are interesting. They're named. So this is part of that usability that we were talking about earlier. 12-character requirement right now. There's a bidding process for the smaller names, so people can't just camp them. And I like to think of accounts as a bucket of permissions, because they can have any number of keys. So unlike the one-to-one you're used to in Bitcoin and Ethereum, your EOS account can actually have an arbitrary number of generic permissions that are used for specific things. And that's really useful. I won't go into it too deep right here. Yeah, you can buy accounts. There's various websites that'll sell you accounts through a faucet because, like I said, you need that initial EOS in your account. Block One's actually going to be giving out free accounts, I think 1 million free accounts when they launch their mobile wallet. So if you just want to wait for that to launch, you can get a free account. But I think you'll have to do ID proofing stuff. And EOS Links is also giving out free accounts. And then anyone who is in the EOS ERC20 Genesis snapshot gets a free account embedded in the Genesis block. And best practice is to keep your owner key offline. So that's your keys to your castle, and then your active key can be used to authorize transactions and stuff. And if your active key gets lost, you can use the owner key to reset the active key. So after you have an account, and after you have your node connected, then you have to do this reg producer thing, and that's registering as a producer. But you don't want to just call that, because it means you're agreeing to a Ricardian contract that has a number of stipulations, including fines for certain actions. So you probably should read that. Registration can be done by calling reg producer. You have to have a valid website URL, a public block signing key, and your ISO country code. Those are some other things that function takes. And block producers are also expected to have this metadata called bp.json at the root of their website URL. They pass into the reg producer function, and that's how all these block explorers pull in data about those block producers. So some example text from the Ricardian contract for reg producer. This is what it looks like. It's human readable. So you can tie these human readable contracts to functions in EOS, and that's really fun because now, this is where the intent of code is law stuff comes in. You encode the intent in a readable form, and then when things go wrong, cases can be filed, and ECAF looks within the context of this specifically, or any other arbitration forum looks within the context of these Ricardians specifically. If it's not in the Ricardians, they can't rule on it. So yeah, for example, there's some interesting ones over here. You know, I agree to maintain a website hosted at URL, so if you don't have that website, then you're automatically out of compliance. And there's a number of things, like it's all about uptime, it's all about not forking the network on purpose and things like that, and not having over 10% ownership in any other BPs is a really important one. For a lot of BPs, I think none of us want any ownership in other BPs because we're more purist, like it's all about independence. Some other pro tips: peer your producer node to seed and proxy nodes. So if you do this, you don't have to put your producer on a public network. You can keep it in a private network and connect it through nodes you implicitly trust. That's something you should do. Yeah, provide a good API and P2P connectivity. So the P2P is the seed nodes to sync the blocks. Gray list noisy, abusive accounts like block Twitter. So they were spamming the network, and there's this gray listing function that kind of rate limits them, but still lets them do some actions. And filter your API traffic through Petronios, which is a web filter that looks for malformed RPC commands. So that's a nice tool. I definitely recommend doing that. So now I'm going to shill EOS Detroit for a bit. So we're a block producer based in Detroit. We announced our campaign back early March. So we were one of the first block producers to announce, along with there was probably like 5 to 10 at that point. And I've been interested in this stuff since BitShares, which was basically the proto-DAC of EOS. So BitShares is actually a decentralized autonomous community that exists or was launched in 2014, and it's been a functioning DAC ever since. And it's still, if you go to their GitHub, people are still updating it. So what I'm saying though is, I came from BitShares to Steam. That's where I met Luke and a bunch of other people, and I just kind of kept following the evolution of the stack. And EOS is when I decided to get serious, because now it's game time. So this is our team. We've got a pretty large founding team. We've got, you know, a diverse team of people from all different races, ages, and genders because we believe that's really important, and we're trying to build, a tech startup culture in Detroit that's not toxic, and you got to start with diversity and cognitive diversity. So yeah, we've got a great team, well balanced. Let's see, why? So why are we doing this? We believe that there's about to be a new era of equitable internet services empowered through protocols like EOS. These are going to bring an abundance of opportunities for people that are internet connected. And essentially, we want to make sure that we're helping people connect to those opportunities through evangelism, through education, through building the apps ourselves and building the bridges to the communities to help them get into it. So essentially, block production is just our bootstrapping mechanism. The vision is actually greater. It's to help people get a part of this abundance that's about to be here. Because we're gonna, essentially, everyone in this room are early adopters, and we still have to hit that 5% that Russell was talking about, and I don't think we're anywhere close. So we still need a ton of early adopters still. So we're all about onboarding people to be early adopters. And we're concerned at EOS Detroit that people that don't have internet connectivity will be left in the dust when this stuff happens. And so they already have a lot of catching up to do if they're not internet connected, don't have much digital literacy or financial literacy. And that's a challenge in our city. So 40% of Detroiters don't have internet access. In a 139 square mile city, people are understandably underserved. So a lot of people are left to their own devices. Communities are decentralized in Detroit already. They're already doing their own alternative economies in some neighborhoods. So it's a very right place to pilot this type of stuff and really build value for people. So our flagship product is a mesh network incentives application that will operate using a local currency and essentially bring the cost of internet down and the access of it. So by using a pay-per-use model to propagate a mesh network throughout the city, we can then allow people to access the mesh network through this local currency we're also deploying, because the mesh net will accept that local currency, so that local currency will also be a utility token. And we're working on the white paper for that. You can expect that this will be announced by early 2019 sometime. We also support other EOS.io variants. So EOS.io is the stack, EOS is the network. So we joined Telos as a launch partner, and we've been contributing there. We helped them set up a dynamic split for founders tokens. So there's this founders bounty system to incentivize people to launch the network. And we were like, how can we make this as fair as possible? Also joined Warbly as an initial block producer. They're basically the Ripple of EOS. And so they're all about AML KYC at the protocol level. We're building their AML KYC sign-up flow and providing infrastructure for them as well. And this is an example of the Founders Bounty allocation. So I wrote a web app that allows people to put in time and cash contributions. So it's called the slicing pie model. And so rather than arbitrarily trying to choose who gets what out of any venture, you can apply, like we use this internally for our equity at EOS Detroit. So ownership in the block producer is actually done through slicing pie. But we've applied this to Telos, and what we're seeing here are various contributors from all over the world who are clocking time or cash contributions into the system. And so on the pie freezing date, which is going to be next week, we're going to lock this in, and essentially all of these people will get their distributions based on that. So this is a product we're actually working on too, and we're going to turn into pies as a service. So anyone can do a slicing pie. You can link it into your founder's token issuance or equity. So there's all kinds of awesome things we can do with slicing pie. We do a lot of other stuff too. We publish a weekly research report called the Weekly Airdrop. That's all about what happened in EOS. We have a Boyd team, which is an EOS DApp that's incentivizing people to contribute CPU cycles to cancer research. So it's a parallel computing project. And we also live stream a ton of calls that are happening in EOS. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can just listen to people that are working in work groups for various networks, EOS, Telos, EOS Alliance, which Thomas Cox, I believe, is the executive director of. We stream their calls. So we're all about transparency, and we want to make sure to facilitate a discussion here because there's way too much going on. It's so hard to keep track of. So we're working on taming that and making it digestible for people. We also have pretty strong local event games. So I think in September we had 6 events, and then August we had 4, and we've only got like 1 or 2 this month, but we're all about engaging our local community, and then we live stream all of these events. So if you ever want to come to Detroit and talk, we actually have a Detroit Blockchainers meetup. So you can talk about Ethereum or whatever, Bitcoin, all of it. Just hit me up. But we prefer EOS. And yeah, so if you want to follow our adventure, you can check us out on social media. And if you have EOS tokens, we'd appreciate your vote. We're number 88 right now, so we have 13.7 million tokens voting for us, which I think is a pretty awesome endorsement, but it still doesn't cut the mustard for getting block rewards. So, yeah, vote for us. And anyone got any questions? So the question was, coming from BitShares, have I looked into BIOS? I only heard about it like 3 days ago. So BIOS is BitShares plus EOS, new network. Yeah, I haven't. I don't know if we'll support it or anything. We're kind of saturated at this point. So, but it'll probably be interesting. I think they're airdropping to BitShares token holders, so it's an interesting way to get them into an EOS network. But I don't know too much about it. What's up, Luke?
How many backups do you think the EOS platform needs to remain in that balance between decentralization, secure, and
That's
resilient?
a great question. I'd say as much as it can afford. Seriously, like if one of the major points of contention within the crypto community is the fact there aren't enough nodes. If we can afford more, that's good. But I do agree. I do like the fact that they added the threshold. So the initial design was that there would be 21 actives plus 100 standbys. But people realized that the people on the end of that tail weren't even going to make enough to run their nodes anyways. So someone guessed that 100 EOS per day was enough, which I think is a strong guess. And that's the threshold. So right now that's about 80 nodes, and I think that's pretty good, to be honest. I'd prefer if there was 88, because then we'd be getting paid too. But 100 maybe would be great, I think. But the tricky bit about lowering the threshold is that also makes the threshold lower for people to game it, that want to just vote their own nodes in. So if you have enough money, so that's the balance that we're dealing with. We want to make sure the threshold is set right. If we lower it to create more standbys, then that creates actually more value extraction from the system by people just trying to profit. So thank you very much.
Thank you.